Hello, everyone. We're back. I'm back with Timothy Smith. We're going to explore the Paul Brunton archives, which are housed at Cornell University, the physical collection. But we have an online uh, repository of all this wonderful collection. And we are going to jump right in and share screen and talk about it and visit the different main sections of this archive. Does that sound okay, Tim?
Yep.
Um, Let me bring up my screen. And here we are. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so here we are in the archives of Paul Brunton online. And we're just going to go down and overview the main categories where we ended last interview. Uh, Paul Brunton's writings, biographical and secondary materials, letters, correspondences, visual media, and Paul Brunton's travel library, which I have to say, I was looking at it again today, and it's amazingly interesting. There are so many wonderful books there, but we'll talk about that when we get there. We're going to start right here at the top and explore the writings. Is that good, Tim?
Yeah, and actually, I'll talk for a minute about the photograph
Oh,
that's there
please,
on the side.
please.
I happen to have that typewriter and the table it's on here in my office. That is PB's typewriter. It's a typewriter upon which he typed all of his books, and whenever he wanted to type notes, he would type them on this typewriter as well. This typewriter is got a couple of very quote unquote special features for those of us who grew up with typewriters. If you grew up with a typewriter, there was a thing called a carriage return where you would like type all the way to the end of the line, and the little carriage would like move along, um, and then you would hit a lever that would then push the cylinder thing all the way back to the other side, so you can start typing the next line, and it would also click down, a space so that you could then start typing, and each line would be evenly spaced with the one above it. PB removed that lever and the ratchet that clicked every space so he could cram the lines right next to each other. So when you finish typing a line, you had like carefully roll up the thing by hand and then slide it over by hand so that then the next line would be, literally kind of typing almost on top of the previous one. And he
Huh.
did this because he traveled with this typewriter into remote parts of the world, oases in the deserts of Egypt, the mountains of the Himalayas, where there wasn't paper. He would have these two ribbons and a bottle of ink that he would then soak the ribbons in to keep them alive, somewhat successfully and somewhat messily. Um, and he typed with this portable typewriter as the most frustrating typewriter in the world to type on. But um, you know, after about a week of it, I went out and bought me a typewriter because when we were working with them, I'm like, I can't do this. This is killing my brain. Um, that is one of his teacups, um, though it looks like it has some kind of milky liquid in it, which he drank very very weak green tea. Um, and he would have people take a spoonful of green tea in a sieve and stir it 2.5 times around the teapot and then take it out. And a friend of mine, Red Witter, once decided to test him, so he stirred it around 3 times, you know, and then served the tea. And BB said, "The tea is a bit strong today, isn't it?" And he had an incredible palate.
Huh.
Um, we have a he didn't like he didn't put like salt and spices on all of his food because the information he got from his food by it being unseasoned was incredible. It's like we were eating zucchini one night, and he said, "Could you ask the farmer if these are the ones that he grew in, down at the southern end of his garden where his walnut tree is?" Because I can taste the difference in these from the ones we normally get, which are on the sunny side of his garden. And so where we mask all of the information that our senses are providing us with about the
Yeah,
food we're eating, he like stripped that away, and what we would take as being really bland was for him like a whole lot of information about the freshness and the component of the state of the garden, whether it grew in the shade or grew in a sunny spot and so forth. And he was sort of a Sherlock Holmes around that. He would once he explained to you how he got there, you go, oh, okay, that makes sense. But
yeah,
anyway, so yeah, this is a little plaque he had of a Buddha. This little canister is a green tea canister. He kept green tea in it. It certainly wasn't ever on a desk. It was in his kitchen. This little Thai Buddha was given to him by the head monk of the Thai monastery when he visited it. At that time, I think it would be called Siam, you
I
know.
am.
Um,
Mm,
and this vase, typical PB, is like we have this priceless Chinese green tea caddy, this unique gift from a High Lama, and then a vase that he bought at the grocery store. You know, it looked nice. So, sometimes he had things which were very economical, and but he liked them for the look that they had. Um, there are some fresh flowers here which would never have been willingly part of PB's landscape. He hated cut flowers. He felt that he could feel them dying and it just depressed him. So he
mm,
would only have, he had potted plants. Um, and on sunny days, he would take them all out on the porch. It's like for a treat. Oh, but um, he uh, he called them his pets, but he just thought that this the you know tradition of bringing people cut flowers was nuts. Because if you were
yeah.
sensitive, you could actually observe them dying, and why would you do that?
And
These are
as
one of the pairs of glasses.
he has a
Um,
few quotes on that. Yes,
I'm sure yeah, and so some of his correspondence and a pair of his glasses. So everything
wow.
here is
So yeah, you really thought this out. It's not just a random picture. Thank you for that
yes,
unfoldment of this. There's so much loaded into it.
yeah. The glasses are I don't know if you know that when PB died, his son Kenneth asked uh, your father Anthony if there's anything he wanted of PB's. Um, and he said the only thing I want is his glasses.
Uh, uh,
Um, and I thought, yeah, if thinking about how the penetrating gaze that PB had passing through those lenses certainly left a little bit of energy in those glasses. I
hmm,
wouldn't ever wear them, but there was something about them which was really um, notable.
hmm,
I noticed the same thing with His Holiness Shankaracharya with his glasses, that they were unlike other things that he used on a daily basis. There was definitely
interesting.
an extra charge there, and I thought that was, people, Kenneth, his son, was like, "Well, don't you want some of his, precious jewel things or whatever?" He's like, "No, he wanted where the energy of PB had gone and what he had seen with those glasses.
Interesting. Interesting.
So yeah, so Paul Brunton writings. Obviously, this is yes. Go
I'll
ahead.
open it up.
Yeah, maybe you go. Yeah, go ahead. Click it up. Um, if you scroll down here, now in this group is not quite in the order I myself would have put it in, but what the hell? The most important group out of all of these, in my opinion, is the second one, idea series old categories.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is that um, if you click that one open just for a moment, idea, and scroll down, we'll start seeing a whole lot of stuff here. Okay, gray long, middle ideas, okay, rough ideas, and so forth. And each one of these is a different epoch that he would write for maybe 5, 10, 15 years, filling up one of these groups. So the vinyl, or the reason they're called vinyl is because they were in these 8.5 by 11, I mean, sorry, 9 by 6 vinyl 3-ring notebooks, and they were the most recent. Rough Ideas, the three, what's up? Rough Ideas 1, 2, and 3 were in these um, leather bound or kind of faux leather things, which are a little bit smaller. They were more like 5 inches by 8 inches, and they also had a 3-ring binder in them. The Middle Ideas series, you can scroll up a little bit there. So yeah, Middle Ideas is huge. Uh, Middle Ideas categories 1 through 6, 7 to 13, 14 to 19, 20 to 28. These were these really thick, weird. The weirdest they were a notebook, a 2-ring notebook where the holes were at the top. Okay, so it's sort of like
Hmm.
you go and see somebody's got a waiter's thing or whatever. So the advantage of them was that unlike well, as if you read these things, the other ones you see, well, he would type all the way across the whole page, and then he'd stick the paper in a hole punch and cut away, 3 letters on every damn page, where the holes would chop out a word or whatever. And sometimes he would go back and fill in, where the hole punch had been. Eventually, in probably in the 1950s or 60s, they started producing paper that had holes in it, and that problem went away. But one way he tried to deal with avoiding that problem of hole punching away his own writing was to use these elongated ones, and also there's just a lot of material in there. It's the most voluminous on any of the collect groups. Meditations with PB is a standalone. Pause for a minute. So you read this, contains testimonials of meditation with PB, overlapping with Carbons 13 and Reader's Letters 3. Um, for a single readable collection of all three, see combined and simplified meditations with PB. So PB meditated in groups throughout Europe in the 40s and 50s, and even in the early 60s. And then people would send him either summary reports of everybody in the group, or each person in the group would write something down, or he would have an interview with them, or all three,
Uh-huh.
sometimes about the same session. So you get three versions of the same 45 minutes with the same person.
I
Um,
see.
and I spent a couple of months deciding how to synthesize those so that the variants were, let's say, not obscuring, but just sort of illuminating a little bit more what people happened to remember the second time when they thought about it, or what they forgot the second time, and so forth. They're very interesting. Um, Meditating it with PB was um, very much uh, could be a quiet half hour, or it could be some form of initiation if a person sort of picked up on the intensity of his own quiet. It was actually quite palpable. And in small groups, you could really actually feel your mind settling down, your body quieting down. I've had that experience with a few people. His Holiness the Dalai Lama I meditated with in a small group once, and he said this little chant, and then we were like immobilized for like 12 hours while we meditated on this healing Tara meditation with him. Um, and it's just a very tremendous energy. PB only sat with people for about half an hour on the whole, sometimes a little more. But there was sometimes some of his inner state of peace would be sort of available, basically because there's no distractions. So if you were open at that moment, you might pick up on some of that. So sort of like a pointer to what you might want to like trying to find in the process of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's
So,
sort of
yeah, that's wonderful. That's one I have not read much of. I will have to visit that, Meditations with PB. Um, and you're saying these are in a way chronological?
they are roughly chronological. They're certainly they're not.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, PB was not really focused on, I mean, these notebooks were for his own use. Um, and while he tended to leave one set alone, um, and so once he got to the vinyls, it's like he wouldn't go back and add stuff to our earlier things. But that wasn't always true. Sometimes he would like find some, uh, uh, paper that was the size of the earlier notebooks, and he'd use those and he'd type them in. So you have this like the gray longs would have like a lot of stuff in them from the 19, I
and
think
they're
50.
wonderful, the gray longs. They're
Yeah.
just such a selection of wonderful writings right there.
So, and this is from the 1940s and 50s, which means from the time he was writing The Wisdom of the Overself to the years immediately following his writing The Wisdom of the Overself. But then every now and then there'll be some like 4 pages about the Mahesh Yogi, from 1967. So
Right.
you can only say mostly for a
Yeah.
particular era. But the Gray
Gotcha.
Long are really very, as you say, the middle ideas in Gray Long are both really very amazing
They're
files.
wonderful. I just can't recommend to people watching this to visit some of these writings because you will get lost in them and you'll find something that really hits home. There's just such amazing breadth of and depth of writings here. That's why we're doing this to hopefully turn other people on to these writings because they're just phenomenal. Not that the notebooks that Tim was one of the main publishers, Tim and Paul Cash were the two main publishers on those, the published notebook, but these are uh, just in a raw form, a more raw form that is just lovely. Just thank you so much for helping to put this all online.
Yeah, this is far more. I mean, these are. I agree. I mean, I did work uh, for 8 years or 9 years on creating the notebooks of Paul Brunton, which was a kind of a synthesis of all of these. I have two long-term, long-standing sort of. I mean, there's always the problem of depth versus accessibility. And sometimes, in order for things to become accessible, you have to sacrifice technical language or more scholarly language or what have you. On the other hand, if you want to like touch down onto that more the deeper or more sharply reasoned material, then it requires more mental work, more mental discipline in order to stay with it. So the notebooks of Paul Brunton were largely edited to simplify them and synthesize the material in them. Almost all of the paras in the notebooks have been edited. They're not, if you read a para in the notebooks of Paul Brunton, you'll find that the words have been modified, the grammar has been improved to more modern language grammar, as PB didn't always use commas as helpfully as we would like him to have done, and so forth. Um, and when you read these in these notebooks, these things that we're looking at now, this is PB's, the way PB's own mind worked and the way he wrote things down for himself. He didn't, this was not him making stuff available to others. This is him catching an intuition on the wing and writing it down. And sometimes you read a sentence and it makes no sense at all at first because it doesn't have easy, simple grammar in it. But if you read it a few times, you realize that it is actually more in the form of a koan, where a meaning is being presented that's just on the edge of what you can verbalize at all.
Uh,
And so it
I like
becomes a
the way you're saying that. I'm just going to open one and just show people what you have done in terms of the original writing and then the searchable. And so you come down here, you can open any one of this, and this is the original document, and you can open that, and you will see all the original pages of the notebook. And there's something amazing there. Um, but
Yeah,
you
go down
can,
a little bit and show the one that's edited. There you go. Stop. Up, up, up. You went too far. I'm looking for that one there, number 22. So
okay,
you look at that one, you see windings, rivers, snowy peaks, and wooded hills, resting animals, peaceful pasturage, uh, feathered ferns, and rustic sites. Dash. This is New Zealand's. Can't read the rest of it. So
right.
outside of the cities. Okay. Um, but then if you read it again, it's like winding rivers, snowy peaks, wooded hills. He took the and after peaks and before wooded and moved it down to before to follow ferns. So he edited it, and then he also considered moving the feathery ferns to behind rustic sites, and then he changed his mind. So you can see he reworked this two or three times.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Now,
He was
one
a
thing I will
real,
say,
I mean, what a writer, what time and energy he put into the art of writing.
absolutely. And I will say one thing. When you're reading these, you will find some of the material is typed in red. That only means that he ran out of ink.
I see.
Um, that many typewriter ribbons of his day came as two colors, a red strip and a blue strip. And when they came that way, he would just use one until it ran out, and then he would use the other.
Gotcha.
And there was no, if he underlined something, that was actually much more likely to be an indication of intentional emphasis. Okay.
Yeah,
But just typing it in a different color simply meant he randomly ran into that rhythm, that ribbon at that time, and he had changed over to another ribbon. It's not really. I mean,
yeah.
it might be something that was um, significant, but I wouldn't put a lot of weight on it. But yeah, when you read this, you get a feel for like the immediacy of how he works that. Now, if we go over here to the other one. Um, I wonder if we can even find the same page.
Let me go back
No, no, no,
and
we're here. We're here. Oh,
yeah, but I'm just because I think for us to play on this, well, so we're here. This is 22. Now if I get out of there and go
wait, wait,
back
wait,
to,
wait. No,
oh, I'm sorry.
sorry.
Tell me what you want.
Let me do it here if I can.
Okay. All right,
Can
please.
I do the? If you can give me uh, to share the uh, control or not. I don't know if we. Uh,
Searchable or original?
No, okay. I want original, just back to where we were. Okay.
Right.
Now click on it. So when you click on the page, okay, now stop. Now
Yep.
this page here, if you look up here on this bar, it says 7 of 409. Okay,
Right.
so that means it's page 7. Okay. Um, this scan over here um, is is misleading. This AD001 underscore 2G001. That's the TIFF. That's the identifier of the original photograph, which was a TIFF file, which
Right.
was then converted into a PDF. Now we did this 3 times. Okay, so we didn't just do it twice. The first image that is available at Cornell is not available online here, and the reason is that each TIFF image is 10 to 20 times larger than any PDF page,
Yeah.
and takes that much longer to load. But the reason it's in a TIFF file is the TIFF file has been legally defined around the world that no matter what other way of reading images into software, converting, taking data and turning it into visible images, all software is obligated to be able to translate a TIFF file into a visible image.
I see. I
So,
wondered why you had used TIFF because it's
yeah,
so uses up so much um, bytes
well,
to.
yeah, it does. Well, the reason is, I mean, the TIFF file doesn't go. What a PDF page does is just okay. The next 42 pixels are going to be blank. So let's see, 42 at 0. So it's like a code, which it then translates into like the image. Well, but a TIFF file doesn't go 42 times blank. It says blank 42 times, right? So you have the word blank 42 times across the page, and then the first character. So it's way, way more. It manages every single pixel. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and what that does is it allows you tremendous acuity in the image. It's 10 times,
Yes.
literally 10 times more. So if you really wanted to break down and see what was this word he scratched out, if you go to the TIFF file, it's a lot easier to read because you can blow it up to 600%, and and then you can really see what was going on. Sort of literally sort of see the pressure marks of the ink. But it takes forever to load. It's
Yeah.
really not useful for most people. But as I say, after let's say when Adobe goes bankrupt, which it will eventually, and somebody will come up with a faster way of cooking up images that are more efficient and use less space and so forth. That new form will still have to read TIFFs,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
won't have to read PDFs. So
No,
if you
no,
have everything in PDF,
Cornell, even 15 years ago, having to read blueprints, um, the generation of computers, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, if I brought up two or three TIFF blueprints at the same time, it would just lock my computer right up because they were so used up so much of your,
yes,
I guess it would be your
yeah.
RAM, but
Right.
anyway.
That's why these computers, you know, this computer I'm talking to you on is the one I used for this process. This computer has 8 terabytes of hard drive memory. It has 256 gigabytes of image. It's got two different um, NVIDIA cards for video feeds. Um, this car this These computers that we use to do this were designed to do edit images and edit film. So they're massive computers. They're not normal laptops.
Mhm.
um, that's what we had to do. So here we. So the point here is this: we see in the original that this is page 7 of the whole document, and if you were to actually highlight AD001 dash to underscore, if you go down to there, it'll be this page here. Okay? So
This
take
this
that.
one here? No.
Yeah. No. bring back that little that bar there. Now highlight this line here. A, keep going down to 007. Click on it and scroll down a little bit on this page.
There it is. Yeah.
There it is. Okay, so that weird, awkward thing. Why? If you bring that line back up again, since we're here, I'll explain that for a moment for those people who are total nerds. Why is see, it says AD? Well, that's your father's initials, Anthony Damiani.
Huh.
Um, Now, why it's called AD is because there was a period of time when some of these files were being scanned by Melody and also at Kenneth's house, and we had two different scans. But we soon found that her scans had a lot of holes in them.
Hmm.
And so we opted to just, but in order to keep the version control of who is doing what, so the ones that were labeled AD were not scanned by your father, but they were scanned by people who were trained by your father. Okay.
Okay.
And that's, yeah, and it would be, um, Paul Cash and myself and a few others. Okay. So that's what all, you don't need to know all the rest of that silliness, but it translates into this gray long you know, categories 1 through 2, and now we have this page 7. Now, if you close it and go to the other one, the searchable, we can see how that translates. So, miracle of miracle, we're on. We here we find the very same paragraph: winding rivers, snowy peaks, wooded hills, resting animals, peaceful pasturage, feathered ferns, rustic sites. This New Zealand outside our cities. Now, go up and look at that page number. It's not 7, it's 5.
It's 5 of
Now,
272.
yeah, because when you type it, it's not going to keep the same volume as these skinny little pages, which are, only 4 inches across, which are going to have a much longer file.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
if you look at the number that we call the code here, this says 7-9. So that 7-9 says this was originally on page 7 of the other of the original, and it's the ninth one from the top.
Right. Right. So,
Okay, so
can I show you? So, like, for me, and I am so glad for the explanation you're doing here. There's also a searchable aspect here, whereas if you were on the original and you wanted to find it here, you could just search for the word winding, and there you'll be. You'll find this
yep,
quote, and so the search function is really great, but it's on the searchable. So I like reading both. I like bouncing back because when you're reading the original text, you really get it's a feeling based in an older time, it seems to me. When
yes, it is.
when he was pounding it out on that typewriter you
Yes,
described.
yeah, that is the typewriter that typed all those pages, and you get a feel for like that when these were done and so forth. And the two things that come out of this typed version is one is that yes, it is searchable. The reason there's a thing called OCR, optical character recognition, and you would think that you could be able to like take a typed page in a PDF. Many AI programs will now read a page like the one we were just looking at. But when it comes to the handwritten corrections and the overwrites and the arrows pointing this way and that, it just gives up. It's like I don't know, and it just produces garbage. So why we tried many versions of OCRs, and we realized you just can't do it that way. You have to type it by hand. So these were typed by hand, and the two things that happen here is then you could read this sort of final result here with where and ends up and so forth, and you see what PB finally settled on as the phrasing of this um, para. But if you look down at all the footnotes here, there's like, there's footnotes 9 through 14. There's, it says, it says PB himself. Well, it says PB himself inserted rivers in the blank. Now, why does it say PB himself? Because some of the commentators originally working on this material attributed every correction to PB, when in fact, quite a number of them were done by myself,
Mhm.
or by Vic Mansfield, and a few were done
Okay,
by Paul. Um, PB had many people edit these things, some of whom are familiar to people at Wisdom's Goldenrod, some are people in Europe. He sort of was testing out different people's
I see.
editorship stuff to see who he was going to like sort of hand all this stuff to. So, he was like, give a page to me and say, correct it. I'm like, I don't really want to do that. And he's like, well, I want you to do it. So, but then, I come back and see that people say, oh, PB made this interesting change in here. I'm like, no, that was me,
I
so
see.
it might not be correct. Don't take, so if it
Right.
doesn't say PB, take it with
Yes.
a grain of salt. Okay, so that's why we give that indication, and we want to be sure that it's clear that it was something that the original author actually did to the original work, not something somebody came along later. Because there's this thing I consider pretty disgusting, which is what I call helping the author.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so that's what this is. So
All
if
right.
you're reading
I'll get out of
this,
here.
yep.
All right. So, Tim, if I go back to here, just in this section, idea series, old categories, we see there's, quite a few. How many pages of notes would you guesstimate are in this section alone?
Oh, I honestly couldn't say, but I would guess around 30,000 pages.
Okay, I want people to get an idea of the scope and breadth of the various sections, and that's why it's called an archive, because it's there is so much material here to visit this, and do some real exploration within your own mind, as you read, study, contemplate some of these. It's just an amazing. It's just I can't. I hope we can turn people on to visiting here, because the extent and breadth of these writings is just really. I found this nowhere else. Maybe there are, but
Absolutely.
it's a collection, but not by, for the most part, a single human being.
No, I mean the 28 categories, which is what these are. He had these 28 categories when there's an essay that expounds upon what they are, but they range from beginning encountering the idea of a spiritual journey, for the first time in your life, and that's actually the first category. Like you've never heard of this
Yeah.
stuff before, and you want to know what's it going to do to your life, and what should you do now that you have this idea that there might be a thing called a spiritual aspects to life. How can you sort of integrate that without, joining a monastery or whatever? And he says, well, you can, and he starts out with low key stuff. Go out and contemplate nature, watch the sun go down, learn how to meditate a little bit, also learn how to relax, just, don't put pressure on yourself. And then he starts wrapping it up. It says, well, like, here's, let's look at what you can do with the intellect, and then let's look at the problems that the
You want me
intellect
to bring
gives you.
up the 28 categories?
No, they're right here, actually.
Okay, I was talking about the
Yeah,
website, but all right.
yeah. Well, no, we could just leave it for now. So
Okay.
just to say, there's this wide range, and if you can go look at them, yeah, you could bring up that site and show what the titles are of the 28 if you want. That's on.
Yeah.
Uh,
So here's the PB website, paulbrunton.org. Go to explore and the notebooks. And here are the 16 published notebooks of Paul Brunton online. Here's the 28 categories, what Tim was just talking about. And here's category one. So if you clicked on category one, you'll see the breakdown of it. And this is where you're talking about that there was some more editorial work done here than what's
Yes.
done in the archives. And
Yes.
it's a help, and yet it's a rearrangement also. Is that fair to
Yeah.
say?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah. I mean, it's more accessible. It's an
And this
easier
is
place
just
to
what you were
start
just
because
talking about, what the
yeah.
quest is, its choice, its independent path, organized groups. And I'll just jump out here and let you speak to the 28 categories. And we can open any one of these categories and you'll see this breakdown. And each one of these are pages of material. So, Tim,
Yeah.
you were saying how the introduction of overview of the quest, and then maybe you might say a few more words on that.
Right. Okay. So two things. The first is okay. This is the final version that PV wanted his material to be arranged in. The old categories do not aren't number one in the old category is not the same as number one here. The number one in the old categories includes more advanced material on the overself, which now is found all the way down in category 22. So, and when I was with PB, he said to me when I first started working with him for the next last year of his life, he said, "I want all my paras to be reorganized in a new order. That's the order that I think they should be encountered in sequence." Um, and so he
Wow.
wanted to
Okay,
reorganize.
so okay, you had instructions. That's I didn't know that. So you and Randy Cash, the other primary editor, with all your helpers, organized this by
Yeah.
Paul Brunton's instructions. I see.
But to be clear, Randy did not get in, Randy followed the instructions that PB came up with during the time he and I were working on them. Because when Randy was there, PB was already shutting down. He only spoke to him for a short while before his stroke sort of made it difficult for him to communicate. Um, and when I was there, I typed up like 15 different versions, and there's a place somewhere in here where in the archives it shows the birth of this new sequence. Because I would type them up, and then we would take 100 pages, and I would reorder them in that order. Then he would look at that for a few days and go, "No, I don't like that order. Let's change it around, and let's change what are inside of each of these different groups." And in the section called "Talks with Tim and Devin," was my first wife. We took notes of this process, and we discussed some of that there, where he would say, well, why he wanted the stuff on the ego, where he wanted it in the sequence, and so forth. And that was we every single day I was with him for 7 months. I would be either working on rearranging the material with him, or you know, reviewing what rearrangement he had just had me do. And so this was a constant process of refinement, and I'm quite sure that if he had lived another 5 years, it would come out different. You
I
know,
see.
uh,
Uh-huh.
you know, he was, he was a dynamic. He was a man who, you know, was always creating, and it was always dynamic. And to think that, and it was not like, okay, this is absolutely the end. And even the 28 categories that we call the old categories, um, that old categories, and I think somewhere down here you can find a comparison. There was somewhere um, a, a a page that showed the old and the new categories
That's in the
cross-referenced.
archives, right?
Um,
Or is it on the website?
I think it's on this website here. I think it's on this page, but I daren't look at it without blowing up the screen. So that's all right. We can find
Yeah.
it another time. But just to say that there
Okay.
were the original. When you look at even these old categories here, okay, these are the old categories, okay, and they have their own titles, and they are the ones that stabilized somewhere around the late 1950s, early 1960s. But if you look at the pages at the top of each page is going to be a Roman numeral, and it may or may not correlate to the Roman numeral that you have in your hand. Okay, because that Roman numeral in your hand, he would rearrange them and he even redefined them 4 or 5 times. Sometimes there were 30 categories. Originally, there were only 15. I asked him, was there a specific reason that he ended up using 28 categories? And a typical PB thing, I didn't ask the question carefully. So I said, did you have a specific reason to limit this to 28 categories? He said, yes. I said, what is that reason? He said, for you to figure out.
Interesting, interesting. So I'm just stopping sharing for a moment to get a full picture. Uh, so that's really interesting. So there is no specifically stated reason that we can grasp onto why we ended up or he ended up with 28 categories.
Yeah, I mean it's 7 times 4, four
Yeah.
levels of consciousness, the seven
And
faculties.
you wrote something up on the categories that is in
Yep.
the archive, correct? That is
Yes.
really kind of a map and an explanation. And so there's so much in the archive besides I mean, the writings are to me the most amazing. The visual library is amazing, but there's all this other material in there. It seems like original material from, the Asiatic studies of interviews with Ramana Maharshi, Atmananda, or otherwise known as
Yeah.
Krishna Menon. But there's all, and then there's this travel library with Subramanya Iyer and Hirayana. He had all these really amazing teachers in his early part, and then it's all there. Now you've written something up that kind of helps people to understand how the categories are put together from the old to the new, correct?
Yes, yes. So there is a file that explains that cross, how that happened and when it happened and why, it's sort of there's a if you look back at that page, there's a disproportionate, like, new ideas. There's like four little documents in there, and then there's like 45
Yeah,
documents in the old category. So the notebooks of Paul Brunton that were published, we tried to, myself and a mere 40 other people, it's sort of spearheaded by myself and Paul Cash. But then we had quite a number of people. It was literally
yeah,
40 people that typed these things up and then categorized them. And we had 2 or 3 people looking at each paragraph and deciding where it should go. And
yeah,
and in most of the cases, um, these were independent people that were students of Anthony, and if the two of them, there's only if two of them sort of had a disagreement about where something should go, would then Randy or I step in and say, okay, we're going to put it here, not there. But
yeah,
so that, I think it's very important to kind of think about that in the published notebooks, it is a gestalt of 40 different minds trying to apprehend PB's vision. And so
yeah,
so it's not just been massaged through one individual's subjective sort of opinion about what to do with the material. So we tried to, like,
yeah,
dilute our individual influences by sharing this work with a lot of people, who each contributed. And because anybody, as soon as you pick something up, as soon as you have you know, the guy that translated Young into English, you're getting 2 binds for the price of one. You
yes,
know,
yes, yes,
and I try to
yes,
avoid that as much as we can because we have something which is truly unique, truly unique. We have the first written document written by a sage in a language that 90% of the world can read for themselves without having to depend upon somebody else come along and give them a translation.
yes,
And
yes,
PB was very, very careful in how he wrote so it was not in the grammar of American English, nor in the grammar of British English, but also in the grammar of Jamaican English, of Japan, people in Japan, how they would read English. and he had like this whole collection of language comparison books that helped that he took into account in how he wrote his material. And one thing he said to me at one time, he said, I was a servant of English for a very long time, but now it's time that English served me.
Oh, interesting,
Uh,
interesting. Two questions for you. I'll start with one. Could you speak a little bit of, so these are categorized there and then edited, but could you speak to that each quote to some degree stands on its own also and is not connected? You have to take them as a self-contained idea, or is that your view? Could you speak to that?
well, it's tricky. I would say that there are many times when that is true. Um, there are also many times when it's not entirely true. He would take, you know, um, you get these intuitions, which are often, I mean, were nonverbal, and then you had to like labor to put them into language. And when he was, what we see in the typed up version is already one step removed. Okay, he had his own occult reasons for not wanting the an extensive collection of his handwriting to be available. And I'll just say that there are reasons for that that some people might be able to understand. But he had a preference that was his sensitivity. So he would take these things, he would write them down by hand, and when he wrote them on hand, he would write them if he was reading an article in a magazine. He would write something in the margin of it. He had little notebooks that he carried with him, and he would write ideas down in them, and then he would send these things to a typist who would type them, more or less in the order that she found them. And sometimes it would be just a bunch of cut up pieces of paper, that had, writing on both sides or whatever. And so there's no inherent sequence to about, I would say 2/3 of the material. Okay,
Okay,
but then sometimes he would actually sit down and type a whole page or three or five by himself, and
I
then he
see.
would actually, so then some of these pages um, were actually typed in sequence, and when you read them in the original notebooks, that's the value of the original notebooks. Is when you read a page there, it sometimes is quite obvious that he's taking an idea and hitting it from several different sides. He
I
might
see.
sort of express it from the point of view of Buddhism, from the point of view of Hinduism, or more precisely, from the point of view of Madhyamaka, then from the point of view of Hinayana, from the point of view of Advaita, from the point of view of Samkhya, point of view of Naya Vaisheshika. I mean, he actually was a trained scholar in Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism and the Tao, to say for sure, and probably some other things as well. So he actually had, he would apply these different frames of reference sometimes, which would illuminate or obscure different sort of components of an intuition. So sometimes he would like work an intuition through many different expressions, and that's why you have to read. That in reading them, you're looking for sort of an awareness, a kind of a thought or a feeling thought to arise within yourself, that, let's say, um, sort of is like an aroma that comes off of some of these pages, and sometimes it's,
Yep, yep.
just one paragraph that'll do that, one para, and many of them were single standalone paras, and yes, they were randomly put on the same page by, the typist. um, but PB then would sometimes, as you will see, if you look at the pages, he would cut those pages up and then glue them back together so that the ideas that he wanted to be next to each other now became next to each other.
I see.
Okay.
Wow, wow. Now, on a very unrelated topic, but I want your studied opinion on this because it seems so important today, because there's such a sensitivity around it. The use of the male pronoun in all of these writings. This is maybe he would write differently today, or maybe he was like you were just speaking before, that he knew the way the Japanese English would take it in, the way the Jamaican, whatever form of English. And could you speak to that? Because some people's sensitivities might get turned off today, and they might miss the forest for the tree, so to speak, because
Absolutely.
and just say a little bit about that, if you would, Tim.
Well, the kind of the PC way to answer the PC sensitive question is that PB said, when asked, um, by myself and then again by Paul Cash, why he, what was the deal with using the pronoun he all the time. He said, well, he's quite aware that there was a problem with that, and that for some readers it would even be a barrier, but he didn't like any of the other choices available, like S/HE, and so forth. He said we haven't really got um, an adequate way to have a sort of an ungendered or freely gendered language, pronoun set in English, you know. So he said, well, he grew up at a time when, you know, he was born in 1898, and he learned to write in like 1900, 1905 or whatever. And at that time, it was absolutely a male-dominated language.
Yes,
And he's like, well, yes, it's a flaw. There's a problem with that. But he said, I trust my readers to be smart enough to know that I wrote for the first half of the 20th century when this is how things were written. And it is not a matter that, it's better or worse than anything else.
I see.
The less PC response, which he also gave me, was like, actually, I was at a table where two people were really badgering him about this. They finally said, I did not write my material only for upper middle class Americans.
Right, right,
So I wrote my material for the world, and most of the world learns to read this way,
right.
um, and or learned to read this way when he was writing. And I would add a third one, and this is the one that I feel is the most important, actually. PB, your father talked to me once. He may have said this to you when he was a young man and he was working with PB. Uh, he was PB's step and fetch. He did a lot of work for PB, and also a lot of practical things for him whenever PB visited New York, which was fairly often. And PB had a tendency not to speak about himself in the first person. So instead of saying, I would like a pot of tea sitting in a restaurant, he would say, PB wants a pot of tea. Now the waiter's like, sure, when is he coming? It's like, yeah, who's PB and why are you talking about him? So Anthony said, PB had him exercise, sort of train him on. Remember, he had to speak in the first person, but his own awareness of his own ego was in the third person.
Right, 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 right,
He
right,
did not experience the ego as I. He
right,
experienced it as he.
right, right.
And
That's great.
if you want to read, there's a book called Self Realization written by Naresh Kamasidi, by Suresh Vakara, that is one of the original Adi Shankara's students, which writes about the three pronouns and how, as a spiritual person's impersonality of consciousness grows, their own perception of their own self moves from the first person I to the middle person you to the third person he.
Interesting.
And it's it's an
Yeah.
extraordinary book.
I will, for people interested, that text will be listed down below, along with the website and the archive, and
Yeah,
that
it's worth
because
reading.
it's worth it. And
So, yeah,
I shall we go back to the writings and share a little
yeah.
more?
Well, just one more thought there.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
if I can find it, if I left my head again. Another person who writes about this shift of pronoun is a delightfully accessible author by the name of Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya. In
KCB.
his KCB, in his essay called "This The Subject Is Freedom," and that really will capture something of this impersonalization, which is not something which is unique to PB,
Right,
but
right.
when you read something where he would write a para that's saying he does such and such, and there's at least a 10% chance that PB is referring to himself.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's
Interesting.
referring to a meditation or a sensitivity that is quite advanced, and we might not be able to, let's say, emulate that within ourselves. So while I wouldn't say that the entire thing is autobiographical by using the third person singular, um, one reason that we left it in the third person singular is who's to say which 10% is that 10% that is uniquely referencing PB himself.
That's so good to hear. I hadn't thought of that, and this is the first time I'm hearing this, and that's a very interesting take, and it carries a lot of weight. I have to really take that in. I think it's really important because our PC or sensitivities today, right, wrong, I think there's a lot of right about them, but to um, misread what PB is writing about and how he's including everyone in that would be a mistake. But yet we're oversensitized today, and at least many people are. And you know, I understand, but you have to, I think, whenever you're reading someone from the past, to some extent, put yourself in the time period that they're writing. If you really want to enjoy the
Definitely.
reading of history, then, read it and put yourself in that time period. This time period, it's still a male-dominated world. There's no cell phones. There's only at the very end of his life can we talk about the advent of some, not sophisticated computers that we might have today. So it was the typewriter. Some of these things are just the way the world was. And remember, he was traveling the world in the 30s, right? Through steamship, ox cart. It wasn't jet planes and cell
No,
phones and
no.
online booking.
Yeah,
His
most of his travels living in tents, you know,
yes, yes.
having breakfast that was
To
slightly
read
charred,
his travels into the Himalayas with the few people he traveled with is really like a testament to his stamina and will. It's not for anybody to do some of the traveling he did from the jungles to the mountains around the world. He really was itinerant, and yeah,
Yes, he gained his wisdom through direct conversations with hundreds of people, some bullshit artists, some sincere and misguided, some crazy as a loon, some profoundly insightful, some so advanced they could hardly be recognized as having personality at all, like Ramek Hotep and so forth. Some extraordinary people, some who might actually have been extraordinarily long lived, like hundreds of years. But it just unique. He certainly studied his books, but he also tested his kind of understanding and grew it through all kinds of encounters with nature and with human beings of many different walks of life, um, and is a very open-minded individual. His third wife, Evangeline Glass, said that there was one time that she and PB had dinner in Berlin, um, with uh, okay, and the name is leaving my head. the conductor, the Berlin
Oh,
um,
oh, yes, God, yeah,
this
the
is
Bur
your guy, not mine.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It'll come to me in a minute. I'm sorry. Uh, it's not Tuscanini, but no. Anyway, I know who you're talking about, and I'm
yeah,
sorry I
so
can't think of it
that
right
guy
now.
and the other guy at the table was Enrico Fellini, the crazy Italian filmmaker.
Oh, wow, wow. Uh, yeah,
So you
yes,
have this classic, powerful classical conductor, and you have this crazy Italian experimental filmmaker who is a really wild man, and PB having this conversation about philosophy and art and literature and the place of philosophy in life alongside of art and literature, music and film. He was, he really was, you know, involved with the richness of human experience. He did not consider philosophy to be, an abandonment, but rather an embracing of the variety of human experience, which then needed to be elevated into something where it wasn't a matter of the experience itself being, let's say, problematic. It was a matter of the unconsciousness of participation in something that made it a problem. So, whenever anything elevated your consciousness, whether it may as a film that made you think or a piece of music that uplifted your feelings, that's part of the philosophic journey, for him.
yes.
Now,
Herbert
and he
von
definitely,
Karajan. Herbert von
that guy,
Karajan.
Herbert von Karajan,
Yes.
a rather fearsome character. Um,
Rather fearsome character. And the Berlin Philharmonic was, one of the best.
yeah,
So
they
we'll
are.
go back
So,
to the writings.
yes, sir. Go ahead.
Um, let's see. I have to open that up again. So give me a second.
While you're getting there, you're going to see something called carbons. So, I want to talk about the process of carbons for a minute. When PB he would send these raw information off to his typist. One woman was a woman named Miss Schmidt, or the German woman, who typed up a great deal of his material in the 60s and 70s, and then was overtaken by a friend of ours, Elaine Mansfield. Actually, began typing things in the early 70s, along with my first wife, Devon. Um, but he would send these packets of notes, paras, and he would type them up. And then he would have this process because, he often in the early part of his life when he was traveling to fairly remote areas, mail was very sketchy. I remember once when I was in India and I went to the post office and I saw that the post office had laid out all of everybody's letters on this vast uh, plaza behind the post office, and then they had peppers and corn drying on all the letters. And your letter wasn't going to get sent until the pepper it was under, it was on, got dried. So, so there's a slight delay of 18 days while your letter was sitting there, serving as a hygienic surface for them to dry their peppers on. So it's like, so I kind of explain the kind of speed of the Indian post office.
Yeah.
So he would have these things sent, or he would first send the a carbon would be sent to him from the typist, and then if he got the carbon, he would send an OK, and they would send the original. But if the carbon got lost, then the person would have to retype the thing to make a second copy, which then they would send, and then they would send the very original thing because it happened more than once.
Yeah.
Now, once he got these carbons, and he stowed them away. He took the carbons and he stuffed them in boxes. They were labeled, and they're labeled so that you could easily connect any given carbon with one of the final notebooks. Okay? He did not edit the carbons. He did edit the originals. Sometimes he so heavily rewrote the originals that you can't. They're unrecognizable in the carbons.
Mm,
So one reason we kept the carbons and then had them typed is because that's his very first formulation of an idea. And when you come to one of these that's been heavily edited, or is missing, where he would literally delete a paragraph by taking scissors and cutting it out of the original. There'd just be a piece of blank paper that he glued there. Well, if you go to the carbon, you can find what it was he cut out.
I see. Interesting.
So, now you say, well, why would you expose that if he threw it? If he eliminated it, because he reviewed all the pieces of paper that he wanted to have left for other people to look at after he died. And since he looked at the carbons and did not throw them out, we know that he felt them to be okay for people to look at and think about in a post-mortem state. Stuff he didn't want us to see. He says, a good secret's the only secrets really only work if you don't know they're there,
So,
right?
your basic idea, or the idea that you worked with in putting the archive together, is if it was left, it's worth putting in the repository.
Yep.
And this repository is a lifetime of work that PB, or Paul Brunton, left behind. And if he didn't want it, it was destroyed, and he did that. So that's really a valuable piece of information, because this archive, and I think that word is a really great word. It's a wonderful repository of a life of seeking, sought, and to a large extent found a life of meeting some of the greatest minds, East and West, a life of travel, a life of correspondence when travel and correspondence were not what it is today. So this is a phenomenal repository. We'll go back to um, for another few minutes and wrap up this session. But I just want Tim to talk more about and next time we'll maybe do a different section if I can
Yeah,
get
for sure.
Tim back. But so I'll open up Paul Brunton's writings. Is that what you'd like?
Oh yeah, let's just finish out that. I think we're
Yes,
almost
let's
done with
just
it.
finish
Yeah.
that out and maybe
Okay,
talk
so
about
here
the
you can
difference
see.
between
Yeah.
these.
So new categories was that new renumbering that I got involved with, and really the only people who actually who directly typed anything up in the new category series was either mm, Devin Cottrell, my first wife, myself, or Vic and Elaine Mansfield. We're the only people that were visiting him, or after we visited him, he sent us these ideas in these new categories. And so they were sort of the very the last ideas, last things he were literally on his mind in the last 2 years of his life. Um, and that's what those guys are. Now, yeah. So, uh, I'll just say, yeah, it says here. So you look at ADBV2, Anthony Damiani's Brown Vinyl 2. Okay, so this was a notebook that was brown. Obviously, there were two of them, BV1 and BV2, and they were just because there are so many paras pages that couldn't be fit into a single three-ring notebook. So the first one goes to the first 13 categories. The second one goes to the last 15 categories. From Again, that's the only difference there. Well, why they're AD is because your father Anthony actually had these gathered together while we were categorizing them. So the yellow vinyl, the blue vinyl, the brown vinyl were ones that Anthony Damiani had some input on. The red vinyl was not. The red vinyl was created by myself, um, and to some extent my first wife. Okay, same thing with RVLS. Red Vinyl Large Series was a second set of vinyls that Devin and I put together. That he mailed us these paras, and then we typed them up and sent them back to him. Okay, so these were the last. So if you want to have an idea of what PB was thinking about in the last 2 years of his life, there it is. It's all
I
there,
see.
and
This is really
and
good.
and, and
Can I ask a question? Are these quotes that are in these volumes in the old series too? And they're just reorganized here, or are these
no,
different and additional quotes?
yes,
Okay, okay, that's really good. That wasn't clear to me. That's really important information. So this
yes,
is additional material not included in the old series.
that is correct.
That's really important. Um, and so and so we went to the old categories here, and now we'll go to the old categories auxiliary.
Yep. If you roll down here, so you can see these are carbons. Okay.
I
Now the
see.
majority of carbons connect to a notebook. Okay. Um, and if you read the blurbs there, they'll tell you which notebook. But if you
Okay.
slow down for a moment here, go up a bit. To Asiatic. There you go. So like carbons for Asiatic, that actually ended up becoming a what we call a themed notebook. So you had 28 categories, and the old category and the new category notebooks are all within what he called his idea series. Then there are themes that were not actually in the idea series, and for example, one of them is called Asiatic ideas. So he specifically thought about Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jainism and Japanese Buddhism versus Tibetan Buddhism and so forth. And his sort of reflections on that material uh, then flowed into um, this this series here, and you can see the lessons. Is for more excerpts in this style, refer to Talks in the Occident, Talks in the Orient, and Carbons 35 Western Interviews. So there are 4 volumes: Asiatic Ideas, um, Talks in the Occident, Talks in the Orient, and Western Interviews, which are specifically biased either towards like Western thinkers, whether it's Kierkegaard or Plato or
Or
Berkeley
Fichte, or yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. And those are going to be found in the ones called Talks in the Occident and or Western Interviews. And then the ones that have to do with Asiatic material either comes with Talks in the Orient, where he's talking to living guy, spiritual people, or but the Asiatic ideas themselves is going to be more like quotes from the Buddha or other people he couldn't interview, right? Because they're long gone.
Right.
So we have in this carbon, and then you have something like carbon 6 phrases. Here's a hint: never, don't bother. You know, it's phrases is something he kept it. We typed it up, but um, most of them are partial sentences um, that he wanted to finish out, and he would take these. And it would be like half of a sentence, and then he would pick this thing up from time to time, and he would finish it. He would write and then the rest would be handwritten.
Mm.
Those which ended up being developed into full thoughts, we transferred into their appropriate category. These here are the ones that were sort of like seeds that were not completed thoughts. They're
Just
interesting
amazing
from
the
a sort of
amount of work into the intuition, the realization, the experience, whatever, into words. And just the amount of articulation. Uh, it's really the only one that comes to mind that is voluminous and is maybe as much as a writer, but really not, is Aurobindo. Um, there's not many people that have written this extent, uh, let alone of spiritual seeking and
Indeed.
searching. Just truly, the breadth is really width and breadth of this is really amazing. So these are all the carbons of what you were speaking about before as
Yes.
the carbons.
Yes, and so some of them then feed into the notebooks, and you can see that where we've been
Yes,
able to point out which notebooks they belong to.
right.
Um, it's in here. Well, we don't have the specific one like this one. Carbons 2 goes into another themed notebook called Atmananda plus 5. Um, and that was because there are five additional groups of material, including stuff by a man named F.W. Levinson, um, and Nora Briggs was a longtime secretary of PB, um, in who's she was in Britain, and she had her own ideas, and she made her arranging of material. Um, she
And Lorraine Stevens was a secretary or a typist, or I see her down here in carbon 6.
Yeah, Lorraine Stevens was a typist. Lorraine Stevens was a strange bird, to say the least.
Yeah.
She was
I
a good friend
believe
of your
she was
mom's.
also a secretary during her life to John Steinbeck,
Yes, she was.
if you would, Tim. Yeah.
She was a what do you call it? A trust fund baby.
Yeah.
Um, so she had plenty of resources on her own, and she spent a lot of time in her early part of her life as a secretary to John Steinbeck, and then she ended up living at the Ramakrishna Ashram in Boston,
Cohasset.
with
Yeah. Yeah.
Cohasset with her best friend who was um, Gayatri Devi.
Uh,
And they were very tight. They often traveled together. Um, and Lorraine was an interesting woman. She was extremely emotional and could be kind of overbearing. But
yeah.
she also was very devoted, and no job was too trivial for her. No, and her compassion for other people's struggles, whether they were directly related to their spiritual journey or just crappy things happening in life. She was a tremendously compassionate woman, um, and really dedicated to basically a monastic life where she, you know, as I say, was
Yeah.
Cohasset, and she did a lot of PB had a dictaphone, um, where he would dictate um, material, and then she would type them out. So some of the material that she typed comes is in here, and it is actually important to know that because when it says Lorraine Stevens, it means that she was listening to an audible. He was speaking, verbally, and she's typing it down, and not being a person who she didn't want to. I don't know how to. She decided that every time PB paused, she should put in a comma.
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
sentences have 42 commas in them. So we did a lot of purging of commas,
A bit about that.
because
I like commas, but that's a bit much.
because people would often pause um, when speaking, sometimes for a great long while. I mean, he spoke very carefully, um, and even then, he wanted to revisit what he wrote, like Tim and Devon talks. We wrote them down. We took shorthand as he spoke, and so we had two people writing shorthand. And when we were done, he's like, "Well, he still wanted to review them because he said even though he's sure that we actually did write down what he said, he said he still wanted to think about what he had said to see if that's the best way to have said it."
Yes. Yes.
Tried to really work on
Yeah.
minimizing the misunderstanding of his material. The other
Yeah.
side of that, and something which really should be in this, no, I don't know how this should be worked out, Lewis, but I think that something that really I wish could be integrated into that archival position are your father's books on PB's ideas.
Mm,
Because, you know, when you read a paragraph, you know,
yeah, yeah,
PB made it work so hard to make it easy to understand that you might think that you did understand it just because you could read it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And Anthony would come along and like hit that thing with a sledgehammer, and all of a sudden it would be 4 hours long, just
yeah.
like or a lifetime worth of like, wait a minute, what does this actually mean? The first of our
Okay.
thoughts is uh, it's like, oh, okay, good to know. You
Yeah,
keep going. It's like,
yeah.
wait a minute, you know, what is the word
No,
hour?
it's such a great point, Tim. He says, Anthony says in one place, he said, to a student who's talking to him, geez, I was reading this and I felt I understood it. And then I've come here and listened to you and I pretty sure I didn't. And his response was great. It was really wonderful. He said, no, your feltness, your heart understood something, but now you have to articulate it into your thinking and willing to more fully understand it. But don't misunderstand that you got something. That's why you're here wanting to talk about it. So your heart understood something. And I thought that was such a wonderful way of telling the person, look at, yes, you understood something about it, but now let's work it a little more, and
Yeah,
I think there's so many things you can apply that to: music, painting, art,
absolutely.
science. I thought I understood it. And then I thought I understood the wave particle theory, and then I heard David Bohm talk about it more, and I was like, oh, okay, a further articulation into the thinking of what that meant. And I think as we go along, we'll maybe explore
Yeah.
a wider breadth, but we're coming to a close here,
Yes, we are
and
today. So yeah, yeah. Just to sort of as kind of a footnote there, that yes, like your father's book, "Standing in Your Own Way" or whatever, it's a really extraordinary demonstration of how you can unpack some of these apparently innocuous little statements of PVs. You
yes,
know,
yes. It was, PB is that very gentle British, and he says these things very gently in some places, or so it seems, and you think you get it. And something of you does. But Tim, I so appreciate this. If people like what we're doing, please leave comments. We always want to improve what we're doing, what we're presenting. Next time, when get together with Tim Smith, we'll talk about another section
yep.
in the PB archives. But in the meantime, uh, please visit them, explore them, enjoy them because they're a treasure. Thanks, Tim, so
You're
much.
welcome. Thank you.